Series from Watkins Glen International. Just a few minutes ago, we saw A.J. Allmendinger come into the garage and it looked like fluid coming out from underneath that car. Parker, what have we found out with the team?
Well, it was actually an oil line was the issue, so the engine did not blow up like AJ had said over the radio he thought happened. And it was still running when he came in, so I thought that was suspect that they could have blown up. But it was actually an oil line that got into a header. They changed that oil line, they cleaned up the oil, they're getting ready to go back out.
It's just one of those things that you talked about, though, Jeff. Just one more mechanical issue that can take a little bit of confidence away from the driver. You see David Rankin in the 23 going back up that access road. Had a little trouble in the turn one, Jeff.
Yeah, you can see he's getting in the corner. Just gets really loose. Probably had it wheel hopping. Got the brakes locked up. Barely touched the tires.
Moved him.
There you go, wheel hopping. And it's so easy. Again, we talked about it earlier. You're going downhill. You're pushing as hard as you can, trying to make as much lap time as you can. The weight transfers to the front. The back gets light. You start that wheel hop, and you have two choices. There's several different ways. The really good road racers, they'll actually push the clutch in a little bit to keep the wheel hopping. The other thing you can do is you can actually give it some throttle, like actually accelerate it just a little bit. The problem is you were on the brakes for a reason.
Just turn one too deep, and to qualify, you have to make up speed somewhere. But what a battle we're going to have here. Chris Buescher, 31st in points. Remember, with the win last week, that is the first step of making the chase. Top 30 is the other requirement. You have to run all the races or have a medical exemption. You must be in the top 30, and you must win a race to be guaranteed in. Well, Chris Buescher has done all the races and won, which you think winning would be the toughest, but he has to find a way into that top 30 over the next 6 weeks or 5 weeks.
Back into the attention of his team. So David Reagan trying to stay in front of Chris Buescher, and Jimmy Johnson currently 13th quickest, chasing after Chase Elliott, who is the fastest of the Hendrick cars. Another racetrack where Jimmy Johnson is winless. Just 4 of them. There are only 4 tracks that Jimmy Johnson has not won at that we currently run, and 14 starts here. 3rd, the best finish for Jimmy Johnson.
He's one of those drivers that I don't think road course racing has come natural to. He's worked really hard. We saw him running 24-hour Daytona races. We saw him enter races and try to get better. Put a lot of work, a lot of effort into it. He's definitely gotten better. There's no question he's gotten better. But he's worked. He's worked very hard. He's a 6-time champion that knew he needed to be better, and I love his work ethic.
So it might not come natural to Jimmy Johnson, but Parker, I think you're standing by with a guy that it does come natural to.
Well, that's Mike McDowell. He just jumped up to 7th on the board in another Q run. That was on scuffs. And he came over the radio and told the team, I made up a lot of time in the bus stop. And as you said, this is a guy that has a lot of road course experience, so he knows what he's talking about.
7th, and Kevin Harvick just beat him by only a 1/10 of a second. So, Kevin Harvick just on a Q run, just got in front of him. He's ahead of Denny Hamlin. He's ahead of Kurt Busch, Jamie McMurray, Jimmy Johnson. So, solid lap.
So, you just heard Michael McDowell talk about the bus stop. This is the bus stop, the interlude, whatever you want to call it. It was added to try to slow the cars down into the carousel. And the interlude is just a big, basically looks like a bus stop. You have to turn to the right, then turn to the left to get back out of it. As you see these cars going over the curve, what I want to talk about is Jamie McMurray earlier in the day talked about how his car reacts to the curves. You have to use the curves to be fast. It is required to straighten up the corners. Look at Jimmy Johnson. 4 tires over the curve. Well, there's no question if the cars are going to go over the curve. The question is when the car lands on the other side, like the 27 right here, getting really loose using the curbs, how does the car settle? So you look at Trevor Bayne right here, all 4 tires over the curb, car sparks, he's going to aim for this interior curb, jumps over it. So Jeff, it's not a question if you're going to hit the curb. The question is when you get to the other side of the curb, does the car continue to bounce, Rick, or does it land one time and settle? That can be the difference between a good or a bad car to the bus stop.
And also, Steve, it's the driver has some responsibility too. I mean, you think, okay, you're going to hit the curb and the car's going to do a certain thing. But the angle at which you hit this first curve, right here where Danica is right now, the angle at which you hit that curve matters. You need to hit it trying to go straight. If you hit it and you're trying to turn a little bit, well, that completely changes the way the car lands when it comes off that curve. So the driver has to bear some responsibility as well.
Because you have to remember, there's no out of bounds rate. The straighter you can make it, the better. The only rule is, I know fancy guys go through the bus stop a lot straight. In the race, if you do that, you have to come to a complete stop. In practice, that's a great escape route. You saw Deanna got brake trouble, gives her an escape route.
Fastest in the first practice was Martin Truex Jr. He is fastest once again in the final practice.